All right. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us. I don't want to waste too much time on an introduction because I want to make sure we have time for questions towards the end. So for our guest, he's no stranger to our campus, and his work and famous list of clients makes up the who's who of the music industry. So without further ado, 1992 Recording Arts graduate and 2010 Full Sail Hall of Fame inductee, Leslie Brathwaite. Hey.
Hey.
All right. So, how you doing?
I'm good.
Cool. All right. So I want to get started with regard to we already kind of know how you left school. You got an internship, worked with Dallas, Austin. You had a great career with TLC. So I want to start with the point where you decided you needed to become your own business. So you finished your internship. What was the catalyst for, hey, I need to now become a business?
A lot of it really was around how the flow of the industry and the flow of what we did as freelance. You know, as a freelance engineer, that was a critical component. Is making sure it formed a company, making sure that you when people pay you, they're paying your company. It's all about the liability, about taxes, about all this stuff. And as an independent contractor, it was a component that I needed to, make sure was in place to kind of.
How did you know you were ready, though? Like, I think a lot of students are, some of them may be really comfortable about where their skill level is and may still do an internship. But at what point do you really, when did you know you were ready to go out on your own and be done with the internship?
I let the circumstance dictate that. I let people kind of dictate that. So for instance, it wasn't about what I thought I was ready for, it was about what everybody else thought I was ready for. So when people are coming to me, and when people are saying, hey, I want you on my session, or hey, I want you to record something, that was to me, and that's how I've always lived my life in general, is I let the things come into my circle and let people pull me and say, hey, I'm ready for you to do X, Y, and Z, because we always think we're ready, and we always think we want to be a lot further along than we are in a lot of areas. But the reality is the world and the industry or your surroundings dictate what you really are and how far you really are.
So not to make us sound super old, but you graduated in 1992. The internet really had not become what it is today. So back then, you didn't have the capability of, okay, let me create a mix, let me show them what I can do and post it on the internet so people can hear what I'm doing. That's a big thing now as far as the branding and getting clients access. So what methods did you use
back then?
Back in the day?
Back then, for me, it was even less about the mix and more about just me. And I wanted to make sure that every interaction that person or persons had with me, they saw who I was. So it was about, I say it all the time, it wasn't about specifically what I was asked to do or specifically mixes or something technical. If you ask me to clean a bathroom, what you're gonna see is somebody who's gonna do it well. I'm gonna make sure it's the best you ever seen, da-da-da, and then that's indicative of who I am. And that's my brand. My brand is that legacy I leave behind. When I got the studio owner coming out of the bathroom going, hey man, who cleaned the bathrooms? The bathrooms are immaculate. And I'm like, yes, that's indicative of who I am. So that was how I promoted my brand, is just everything I was a part of, I made sure I was excellent at it.
So in saying that, do you think now, particularly in 2018, the focus is too much on the mix? Or?
No, I mean, it's different times, and we as in the world, we've evolved to a point where things are faster and quicker, and we are in a microwave society, and everything is, the internet is instant. I can work on an album today, and by tonight it could be out. That's insane in terms of how things used to be. But at the same rate, I think that I don't think the focus needs to be less on that. I think, like I said, even in relation to the previous topic, it's about letting your work speak for itself. So there's no problem with promoting your work, or, if you copyright your stuff correctly and you put your stuff on SoundCloud or X, Y, and Z, let people determine if they like it or not. And you kind of evolve based on the reaction you get. And a lot of times what I see these days is, again, people always tend to think they're better than they really are, or they're further along than they really are. And you got to let that response kind of dictate where you really are. So it's about letting the work speak for itself.
Okay. And between coming out of school, the internship, and then starting this business, now you're starting this business, how did you sustain yourself financially while you were trying to grow this business of you being a freelance mix engineer? So were you waiting tables, babysitting?
The first thing was my mentality, which was living well below my means. And then it was going out and finding a job that was very conducive to a rapid change schedule, being able to swap out schedules with somebody. A lot of people gravitate to the waiter or waitress jobs because it's easy to swap schedules with somebody in a restaurant or in that type of environment. For me back then, it was FedEx and UPS. And at the time, based on your position, you can swap out schedules with people really easy, and they were very cool about just letting you figure it out amongst each other. And as long as the work got done, they didn't care. And that was the kind of job I targeted because I wanted to be able to have that flexibility of, hey man, can you cover for me today? Because I got to go to the studio, or I'll cover for you tomorrow. And because we work such crazy hours, mostly at night, I was able to cover people in the daytime hours a lot, which helped me out. So it was very cool to have a job where you can, get people to cover you and be flexible. So those are the type of jobs that
Were you living with family? Did you?
Oh, no, I was living on my own. Living by myself, living below my means. I had a little rusty Ford Escort, that I paid like $1,500 for. It was the worst little car ever, but it got me from point A to point B. And that's what it was about. It was just about maintaining and surviving. Ate a lot of ramen noodles. People hear me say that all the time, and it's very true. They were like 25 cents for like one of the little. It's great.
Add hot water, and that's it.
Yeah, that's the greatest living ever.
Do you remember your first client as an independent contractor?
I do.
How was that?
It was interesting. So there's different levels to that question. My first major client or just my first client?
Your first client.
So my first client, they were an independent act in Atlanta. And it was fun. They were just as new and young to the process as I was. So we were kind of exploring and learning together. And it was a lot of, just a lot of learning, really, more than anything. But
I think I kind of have a question similar to this coming later, but from that first client, what did you learn? You said a lot of learning. So what is the biggest thing you took away from that?
From that first client, the one thing I probably learned the most is it's very important to develop language with people. And that I probably took that, whether it's in a work sense, whether it's in a relationship sense, whether it's in a friendship sense, whether it's in an employee to employer sense, it's always important to develop the correct language with someone, to understand how to communicate, how to figure out what you're trying to accomplish, figure out if I can help you accomplish that language, that probably is what I learned the most.
And you feel like you've perfected that over time?
Yeah, I don't know if I've perfected it, but I think I've done pretty okay with understanding how to, determine what that language is. And that's one of the things I focus on first when I meet somebody. Like when I first started working with Pharrell or whoever, it's about developing a language between us. What do you want? And when I say a language, I mean even down to the primal things, like when you say you want something to sound warm, what does warm mean to you? Because it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. Or when you say you want something to sound big, what does that mean? Breaking down those terms and words and understanding how to get people from what they want and expect to actual manifesting that. That was the thing I learned the most. And it's, yeah.
You talk about developing that communication in the language. So one of the questions that we get as instructors often from students is the topic of money with clients. How do you initiate, or how would you advise initiating that conversation? Because for a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable.
Right.
So how was that first experience for you talking about money, and then what could you kind of impress upon the students?
Yeah, and the thing about language and discussing topics, especially topics that are difficult, it's all about how you frame your statements, questions, all of the above. And so money doesn't have to be an uncomfortable topic because it's a part of the equation. And if you come to me as a client and you say, hey, I want you to mix this record, it's okay for me to retort with, okay, what's your budget? You know, and then let's have a conversation about, you kind of make people feel comfortable about how they answer the question by the question. Just even presenting the question of, so what's your budget? Now you're giving them a little bit of freedom and space to kind of help create, as opposed to if you just come off like, all right, cool, yeah, I can mix that song, but it's going to be X, Y, and Z. If you come in with a hard rate, that automatically makes it uncomfortable because you didn't even leave any room for any kind of fluidity or conversation. You just said, this is what you get, and that's it. So there's a way to always approach things. There's always a way to make language more comfortable. I just answered a question in a class earlier where somebody asked me, how do you tell an artist that you don't like something? You know, well, instead of accentuating the negative part, just accentuate the positive part. So I can say to somebody who I know is sensitive, if I think that the vocal they just did sucks, I could just say, you know what, you could do that better. That's still a nice way of saying, I don't like what's there, but I'm encouraging, in a sense, I'm saying, you know what, you could do that vocal better. Now I'm appealing to their sense of, oh yeah, I could do it better. So it's the same thing with money conversations. You don't have to approach it in the negative aspect, just approach it in a positive light.
And I think part of that question or that concern for the students comes from the fact that they're just getting out of school and they feel new. And for some, they're like, well, should I really be charging? Because I haven't been you've been doing this for, you know, what, 20-something years
27
now.
years now, yeah.
But they're just getting out of school. So, you know, how do you instill that? I mean, I know, and I have this conversation with them too about you're going to have to just present yourself in a confident manner. I don't care if it's the day after graduation. You got to let them know, this is what, I just went to school for this. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's all relative. So it's about, I think what makes those conversations easier on the front end of things, like when you're just coming out of school, you know, even when you're in school and still trying to charge for work and X, Y, and Z, I think what makes those conversations easier is when you're realistic about the amounts.
Right.
And you're realistic about your approach, like I said. So you don't have to be like, think that you can charge what I charge to mix a record, but even if you're only charging a couple $100, you can still start the pattern of, okay, it's going to be $200 for this mix, give me $100 up front. You can start that pattern of expectation so that the client knows, even in dealing with little numbers, it's still the same principles and it's still the same way you're approaching it. So it's a lot of times I think where students and younger engineers or younger producers get tripped up is they want too much too quick and they feel like they deserve more. And it's about just, you know, you got to learn how to pace yourself and understand that you don't have a large resume yet and just work your way up. And sometimes you may have to take a slight L, or, you know, sometimes a situation is more valuable to you than the money isn't the most valuable thing that you can get out of that situation. Sometimes the relationship is the most valuable thing, or, you know, the hookup, or introduction to somebody else. So every situation is different. I always encourage people not to go into every situation with the same template and mindset of, this is how much it's going to cost, this is how I do business, this is how I talk to this person. Some people are different. Even just the way you talk to people are different. That's why I say it's important to establish the language, because I may have to have a delicate conversation with one person, and another person I might have to be a little aggressive. It just depends on the person. And
taking that into consideration, which obviously is going to be my next question, is determining the price. So you pretty much said don't go into this having a rate sheet. So what should they take into consideration in determining what they should charge?
A lot of times how I tend to do it, I've done it in the beginning of my career, I do it now, where you there's two parts to it. You do your homework and you kind of understand, if you know somebody that's worked with that person before, hey man, and that person is, you have a good enough rapport with that person, you can say, hey man, would you charge so and so, or would you, or you can do some homework to kind of find out where things are market wise. If you don't have access to that type of information, whether it's you don't have somebody you can ask that they worked with before, or that kind of information isn't out there, you can kind of find a way to just pull it out of them. You can say to them, so what are your expectations? I've done that with clients where, you know, and a lot of times it'll work out in your favor if you kind of play it right. If you kind of know, like if you know, if your client pulls up in a Rolls Royce, you know, your client steps off a private helicopter and then pulls up in a Rolls Royce, you're not talking me down. Like you got some money. So now, so I'm gonna just feel you out, and I'm gonna say, well, how much is it worth to you, or what are you trying to pay? And sometimes you'll be surprised. People with a lot of money will say a rate that's way higher than you were thinking. So you in a lot of cases, you can talk yourself out of some money if you're too rigid with your rates. You got to kind of feel the situation out. And like I said, you pull up in a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, I'm going to see what you're trying to pay. Because what you're trying to pay might be a lot more than what I was going to charge you anyway. And then when you say that higher number, I'm like, yep, let's do that.
All right, so I'm going to circle back to money and finances in a second. But what I first want to ask you is that a lot of students are really close to their projects and haven't yet worked with a client at all, or a picky client. So how well do you handle criticism, and what are your recommendations first? Because even as instructors, many times they don't like what our feedback is, but
criticism is a built-in component of what I do. Every single project, every single day, I get criticized. Every time. And it's not a bad thing. You know, this morning, I'm at my hotel room on the phone with Beyonce, where she's going, hey, can we turn something up real quick for the physical delivery? Or it happens. Every single day you're getting criticized. And you don't even just get criticized from the artist or the producer. Sometimes it's your peers. I worked, in a collaborative forum on some of the, on these most recent projects, and you will get criticism from your peers saying, hey man, I think you could do this. And you got to learn how to take criticism, and you got to learn how to take notes about your mixes and how you can improve your, because at the end of the day, you're trying to deliver a product that they want or that they like. And so it's important to understand how to take criticism. It's a built-in component, and it's kind of like it's part of the deal. I don't expect not to get criticism. And I think the more you just detach from your work, and it's not about you, it's not about my feelings. When I'm mixing a record for Lil Uzi Vert, it's about what he wants. It has nothing to do with what I want.
Do you dissect criticism when you hear it? Like, for example, if you've mixed a record, the album comes out, and people are like, oh, this song sucks. In your head, are you like, what part of the song sucks? Like, was it my mix? Or you just don't like his verse? Or, like, when you hear criticism like that, do you run through that in your head?
The beautiful thing about doing a technical job is most consumers don't really care about the mix per se, or they don't even know how to dissect the mix.
So you're not even worried about it?
Most consumers care about the actual song. And if the song sucks, I've mixed things that I thought the song sucked, but I thought I did a decent job. And, it's all, like, none of that kind of stuff, for me, my personality, just does not bother me. I could care less.
You mentioned the collaborative aspect, particularly on this last project you worked on. Our students hate group projects, but they get them like every month. They always have to work in a group in some aspect. Can you talk about, like, and the other thing is too, is like, you're here and we see you working on your own, on your laptop, but there are times when you have to work in a group. Can you talk about that dynamic in the audio world? Yeah,
it's important. I mean, a lot of times I do mix or work, solo and by myself and on projects, but there are times when you're working with specific artists and they want you to work with other engineers. There's other mixers on the project and they want y'all to collaborate, and you have to learn how to work in groups. And honestly, you get the best product that way, because now you're getting, instead of just my ear on something, I'm getting another set of professional ears giving me honest criticism on something. That's amazing. Like, so you can't help but to have a better product. And you know, this last go around, there's certain things I can and can't talk about. I signed NDAs, which we can talk about later. But this last project I worked on with Beyonce and Jay-Z, where I'm working with some of these guys that I respect, and I've looked up to their mixes for years, like Tony Maserati and Young Guru and Stuart White. These are all guys that I really, really respect. And it was an honor for me, for Tony to say, hey man, I think you need to do this, or hey man, we should do this, or you can't help but to get a great product. So I love working with, you know, like I said, you got if you're working with 3 other people, you know, that's 3 other sets of ears you got to help you achieve your goal. So
in those situations, is someone designated the point person for that group of you guys that are working together?
A lot of it is you kind of go into different situations with different chains of respect. I mean, Stuart White he's Beyonce's engineer. Young Guru is Jay-Z's engineer. And so even me coming into a situation like that, I have to yield and respect whatever Stuart feels like would be the best as far as her ear, or same thing with Young Guru, where I have to yield and respect whatever he would feel is best for Jay's ear, because they are the people that know them the best. And it's not about coming in with any kind of an ego or how many of the Grammys I won, and none of that is relevant. It's all about, I'm here to do a job, and I respect you guys so much, and how much you're able, like when I see what their world is like, and what, you know, being able to work while on tour, and it's amazing to me. So like I respect whatever, it does kind of follow a slight chain of command in the sense of those are the guys that are with these people the most. And so you just naturally have a reverence to whatever they are feeling, or, you know, that kind of thing. And that's the same thing in any situation where there's a lot of times, one thing I've seen mixers not be able to do is, a lot of times artists will have a recording engineer that stays with them most of the time. And then as a mixer, a lot of times I need the approval of the recording engineer first, because that's the person who knows this person the best. And that's fine for me. I don't have any ego, nothing to do. Like with Pharrell, Mike Larson, Full Sail grad, he's Pharrell's recording engineer. He records all of Pharrell's stuff. And me being the mixer, I have to yield to what Mike likes or what he wants, because he's the person that knows Pharrell best. So getting his input and feedback and criticism is super helpful. And I actually love it. I love working with other engineers, and I respect that whole reverence for other people's opinions. And, you know, I never have an ego in those kind of situations. I'm happy to be there.
When you get these phone calls, do you still get nervous ever?
I don't know if it's a nervous thing. I still get excited. I mean, I talk about it all the time. It's funny. I had a conversation with Stuart White, Beyonce's engineer, and he and I were talking when we first started talking about the project. And I was like, man, we just had a moment where we just kind of dialed back and was like, man, isn't it great that we get to just do what we love to do every day? Like, who are we to complain about any circumstance? So I think he might have pointed out how cool it was that I wasn't complaining that I had to get on a plane to London right away. And I'm like, who am I to complain about anything? Like, it's all good. Like, you know, so it's always, I think more so, instead of nervous moments, I have very grateful moments. I have them a lot. I'm always like, man, like, this is a cool life, like, to be able to do what I love to do, work with, you know, the world's biggest stars on a high level. I mean, when I'm working with, you know, like my last few months have been insane, from Cardi B to Pharrell to Beyonce, Jay-Z. Yeah. That's, you know, like, so I'm always in those grateful and thankful moments all the time.
Which brings me to something I hadn't thought about asking you, but this is a good moment. You said you got a phone call, you had to jump on a plane and get to London. Being prepared at the drop of a dime. So you need to have your passport. So just like little things like that could be the difference between, like, what if you didn't have a passport?
Right.
You know?
You're right.
You would have missed out on that opportunity because they don't have time to wait for you. So everybody get a passport.
Yep.
Get a passport.
And that's super important. And I tell people that all the time. And it's all these things that, you know, we grow up hearing our parents, you know, nag at us about certain things. And you come to Full Sail, and the teachers kind of assume that role where you think a lot of the things that they say you know, or they either sound mundane or you're like, oh, okay, we get it. But that stuff is important. Like, just like you said, if I didn't have my passport, if I didn't have my Pro Tools rig ready, and I'm always, you know, refining my rig and making sure things work and downloading new plugins and checking and da-da-da. And you got to be ready. You got to be ready for that moment. And it was, you know, it was literally, you know, I get a phone call, hey, can you sign an NDA? Sure. Okay, sign the NDA. Then they tell me what it's about. And then I'm on a plane that night and I'm off. But you got to be ready.
And you're comfortable signing those types of documents without consulting an attorney. Well, first of all, these are people that you pretty much trust.
Yeah, and those particular documents, NDAs, for those of you who don't know, an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. And basically what it does is it stipulates what you're allowed to talk about, what you're not allowed to discuss. They can apply, like for instance, the NDA I signed with Beyonce and Jay, obviously, I think in the first paragraph, it talks about what the premise of the whole setup was, which is we're going to work. We're not allowed to post where we're going. We're not allowed to post while we're working on the album. She wanted it to be a surprise. They both wanted it to be a surprise. So we have to respect all of those stipulations while we're working on it. You know, the night it released, then it's, you know, I think I looked at Teresa, her A&R, and we kind of followed her lead, and then she was like, yeah, you can post about it. You can say you worked on it, you know. And then we all like, yes, I can finally say what I was doing for the past 2 weeks, you know. But
it was
still,
like exhaling.
Yeah, but there are still details of that non-disclosure agreement that still apply to this day and will apply for the rest of my life, which is there's certain aspects of their private life that I may have been privy to on this trip that I'm not allowed to discuss publicly. They don't want their business out there, and we, as professionals, you respect that. So there's certain things that I'm always on a mental checklist, like when I'm doing stuff like this, to make sure I don't say X. And it's nothing, you know, crazy or da-da-da, but people just want their privacy and they want to maintain the functionality of working in a certain context where they know they can work with you and you're not going to spill all their business for, or, you know, get a couple $1 million and do a tell-all book, you know. So you have to sign those agreements so that you can't do that kind of thing.
So now I want to talk about money, right? and we're going to come back to more of the legal documents and stuff. But so money and your finances. So I don't want anybody to think they're going to get out of here and immediately start making this crazy amount of money. How was your credit when you started? And by credit, hopefully everybody knows you have a credit score, credit report. If you don't know it, check it.
One thing I've always been pretty proud of is my credit. My credit was always pretty good. I've always maintained good credit. It was one point I had like my credit score was like whatever the highest it could be, and like I didn't know, and we were doing something and they were like, dude, you have the highest credit score ever. Like I think it was when I was purchasing my first house. And I didn't know what, you know, I never checked my credit, but I've always been good at paying bills on time, paying back loans, doing whatever. I've always been good at that.
What do you do to stay organized?
I just take time out, a little chunk of time every week to kind of handle business. It's not something I love to do, but I prefer to do it myself because I want to understand it. I want to make sure I'm doing things the right way. And if you dial it in and kind of get into a habit of doing it, you can kind of not, like mostly every Monday I try to like focus on business for a little bit, make sure. And sometimes, and in this day and age, it's so easy to handle business. It's so easy to, you know, you spend 2 minutes filling in the parts for your invoice. You put in an email address, you click send, and then I may text the person and say, hey, I sent you my invoice last week. Did you receive it? Oh, yes, cool, blah, blah, blah. Make sure I push that through right away. It's not that difficult to handle business.
You just have to set time aside.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because I see a lot of students get stressed out. You know, they're handling a lot of things at once, but so are you.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of finding a way to kind of check yourself.
Yeah, and there's room to understand that everybody's not built to do that. No, a lot of people, some people don't like doing that. And if you realize that about yourself and if you identify that that's not in your wheelhouse or personality, hire someone to do it. And you'll be better off than just, you know, because if you just, I've seen people who complain and complain about doing it, but then they don't want to pay the little 10% or 15%. If it bugs you that much and it holds you down so much and messes with your creativity to the point where you're just dragging, it may behoove you to hire someone. It may be to your benefit. So
how do you, well, let me back up for a second. So when you do get that nice first check, and it's a nice one, it seems like, and you already said that you were living below your means, but you've been very transparent about the tax issue that you had with the IRS. So let's back up before you tell that story, because I love that story. I'm sorry it was a traumatic moment, but I love that story. So who taught you about taxes? Like, you know, I mean, no one can be that ignorant to know that, not that I'm calling you ignorant, but no one can be that ignorant to not know that you have to pay your taxes. So as a young person, now you're treating yourself as a business, money is coming in, but you are responsible. There's no employer taking taxes out.
I was that ignorant. And I was like, you know what it was? It's one of those things where when that IRS agent was sitting in my house and she was like, she asked me the same question. She was like, so let me ask you something. She was like, level with me. You're making this much money and you know that there's a thing called the IRS. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, so you know that taxes weren't getting taken out? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, so you weren't paying us the taxes? I was like, yeah. And I went down that rabbit hole of answering those questions, and I don't know what it is. I think creativity and the excitement of working and doing something I love, and I was proving everybody wrong because my mama said, she was like, she didn't understand how you can make a career out of this, and so you just, and it's so much work. I'm working. Sometimes you would work 40 days in a row and not have a break because you're just working and you're excited to get work and keep working and da-da-da.
And money's just hitting your account.
Money's just coming in and you're buying Jordans and you're buying cars and you're doing this and you just keep working and working and working and you ain't taking no vacation. You're working and then all of a sudden the IRS show up at your door. So that's, for me. And I always say, you guys, current students and future students, you guys have the benefit of this educational component. Monique stresses this in her classes about taxes, and you guys have the opportunity to learn what I didn't have the opportunity to learn back then. Back then, we didn't have music business or entertainment business in Full Sail. We only had 2 degree programs. So you guys have a huge opportunity, and really take advantage of that opportunity when they're talking about these kind of things. That's one I wish I could dial back right there.
So how long after that traumatic situation did you decide I need an accountant or somebody?
I mean, immediately after, while it was happening, I got audited and they showed up and they was cutting checks off and they was, And so I was like, what is happening? So no, I went and sat and talked to a tax attorney right away, got educated. And my thing was, I didn't want to pay somebody to handle it. I told the attorney, and it was Dallas's tax attorney at the time, Dallas Austin, the producer I was working with. He kind of, empathized with what I was going through and was like, look, meet with dude. So I sat down and said, dude, I want to pay you for your time so that you can explain everything to me. I don't want to just pay you to handle it.
Right.
And he did that. I paid him for the time, and he explained how it worked, explained what I want to do. And not that I wanted to do them myself, but I wanted to know what I was signing or getting into every year.
Yeah.
And so once I understood the process and really wrapped my mind around it, I was able to move forward from there.
Because I think what is really hard for people to grasp is when you think company, you think establishment. But what people don't realize is that you, Leslie, are a business.
Yep.
That's the business right there. You got to handle your health insurance, and you have a family, right?
Yep.
So you got health insurance, you got your taxes, you have self-employment tax, like all that craziness is all you. Whereas, I'm an employee. We have a department.
Right.
We have HR that handles all of that, and I just get my check and I don't worry about it. So I think there is some fear or some apprehension when you're looking at a group of 20-somethings who are like, I got to do what?
Yeah. And like I said, I don't want to do that part of it. That part of it I don't want to do, so I pay somebody. But I wanted to make sure I understood what I'm signing every month or every other month or whatever the case may be, and you know.
And I had that conversation with Darren Schneider. He was talking about, you know, Leslie is a very do-it-yourself kind of guy. There are other people in your position that have managers and agents, and they have this whole team working for them.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, you got to pay all those people.
Right.
So that's just money. It's like having more kids, just crumb snatchers, taking money out of your pocket, right?
Yeah.
But you do everything yourself.
Yeah. I do all my invoicing.
Are you confident?
My conversations, yep.
Okay.
My conversations about money and dealing with new clients, all that I handle myself. The only thing I pay somebody to do is taxes. But everything else I handle myself.
All right. So there is one area that several instructors wanted me to bring up with you because, and this is also a thing for my class too, because I cover intellectual property. So additional revenue streams. The way revenue streams work is mainly for people who are content creators, songwriters, composers, you know, visual arts, that sort of thing. As a mix engineer, you are not a content creator. You are managing what other people have created. You get paid, so you're a work for hire.
Work for hire.
Right. So most of the culture in our industry is geared toward people who are the content creator. So when a client comes to you and you have to, you know, provide stems, you know, and you have to bounce everything down and whatever for them, are you finding, or what are you finding as far as other types of stems you're being asked to provide because your client is considering some other area of work with what they gave you? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. We. So the first thing they make us do as a mixer is sign a mixer agreement, which states you are work for hire. That's basically the meat and potatoes of a mixer agreement. It's letting you know, we said we're going to pay you this. You do not own this work. This is what you get. When you provide this, you get this, and then we're done. That's what the mix agreement states. And a lot of times, yes, they do want stems for, like, for instance, one of the gift and the curses of mixing on hit projects or hit records, like with Cardi B, I'm still sending different cut downs and different stems for I Like It Like That or different songs because it blew up and it's successful, and they want to, like you said, pursue different avenues, whether it's commercials, whether it's an Amazon commercial or a so-and-so commercial. Or I remember with Happy, I had to send different versions for like a Fiat commercial and a so-and-so commercial. So the more successful something is, the more we do have to provide different pieces of the mix in certain formats for them to use.
Does that include video games? Are you having to do anything different with the mix for video games?
Yeah, sometimes a lot of times not necessarily anything different, but they will ask for a lot of different parts. The stems, like you said, where it will be the mix, but broken down into like the drums, the guitars, the so-and-so, because they want to use certain parts. Certainly with movies, that's the way we have to deliver it. We have to deliver it with a bunch of different separated stems so that the movie people could then determine if they want to put the 808 in the middle and put a snare drum over here, or if they want to pan it, because they're now dealing with a realm that we don't deal in. We just deal with stereo, and then they get all the separated sounds and they can pan them around your ears. They can put one back here, one over here. So the movies, a lot of times, like when I delivered Happy, I mixed that for the Despicable Me 2 soundtrack, and then the people from NBC Universal called and was like, hey, we need this broken down like this, and this, because they needed those parts to place in the movie a certain way.
So that brings me back to the contract. So one of the things that I bring up with the students is when you get work from a client, outline what they're asking, outline what their needs are in the agreement, what they're going to pay you, when it's due, deliverables, blah, blah, blah. Now, they're coming back to you after the fact. And you don't need to tell us what you charge, but is there a charge when Universal is coming back and like, oh, thanks for that song, but now we need blah, 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 blah.
Yes, and it's stipulated in the mixer agreement. All of that is in that. So
you've already addressed that.
Yeah, all of that is in the mixer agreement where it says, okay, the mixer agreement is basically this. We, whatever company it is, are hiring you, which is me, and my company, to mix this particular song. Here's what we require. You got to turn in all the parts for mastering, the main mix, TV mix, acapella, instrumental, blah, blah, blah. Then you got to turn in all the stems, the broken down individual parts of the mix in stem form. And you have to turn over the original session that you worked from, the working session, the Pro Tools session. Back in the day, that used to be the reels, the 2-inch masters. Now, in today's terms, the masters are considered to be that working session. Turn that over. Then there's another section. And if we need changes, blah, 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 blah. This is how much you work out, you negotiate. Before they put it in writing, you always have a conversation with somebody. You say, hey, this is what I charge. This is how much I'll give you. I'll maybe throw in 2 or 3 revisions for free. You don't really charge for like the first couple things. And then if it gets a little bananas, or if the revisions are things that don't have to do with a change on the mix, but a different version that you need for something else, we charge for that.
And maybe like expediting. Like if they contact you on a Friday and go, hey, we need this by 9 a.m. Saturday.
That's a given.
That's an extra charge.
That's a given, yeah.
And that's not being, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that that's not being nitpicky or greedy. Your time is money.
That's his life, yeah. And, and the beautiful thing about it is the higher level people you work with, the Beyoncés and the Jay-Z's and the Pharrells and the Cardi B's, the people who are very successful at what they do, they understand how to do business. And they know if they calling you on a Tuesday morning and expect you on a plane to London by Tuesday night, they know what they got to do. You know what I mean? They know. And so there's no back and forth about it. There's no, oh, you're charging too much. They're professionals just like we're professionals. And so it's understood. And people, I was just on the phone with an A&R the other day working on some Cardi B stuff, and she said it before I said it. She was like, hey, make sure we want this change for this, and this, and make sure you invoice me for that change. And they know how to do business professionally. And that's the beautiful thing about dealing with professionals. Everybody gets it. Everybody knows what to expect of you, what to expect of themselves.
But you've been through those situations where even the professionals are being unprofessional.
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll have those major record labels where it's just an indictment of the fact that they're just disorganized and nobody knows whose job is what, and things get lost in the sauce, and you might not get paid for 3 months, and and then you got to kind of next go around, we got to have some conversations. Are
you chasing your own invoices, or you have somebody doing that for you?
I usually do it myself. And it's effective for me when I do it myself, because y'all got to still come back to use me. So that's the beauty of being good at what you do, doing good work, and establishing good rapport with the people that you work with. Because if I got an issue with a specific label, and then the artist is dead set on me mixing their records, the label gonna have to work it out. So they can only dodge you but for so long.
Now, are they doing business with Leslie Brathwaite, or are they are they doing business with Dub 750?
Dub 750 Music is the name of my company, and yes, so on the mixer agreements or on the contract, sometimes it'll say my name, doing business as DBA. Yeah. But yes, they're doing business with my company. They're making the check out to my company. Okay. Or when they do direct deposits, it's going into my company account.
Can you, before I jump to the next thing really quick, so just this morning I had a conversation. I was trying to explain, or I explained what quarterly meant. And a lot of companies are paying you quarterly. Some you are a work for hire, so I don't know, and you can chime in on this. I know you don't take quarterly payments. They got to pay you when the work is done. But are there ever situations where your payments are being spread out? And if so, are you keeping track of it on a calendar so you can follow up with your clients? Like what do you, how does that work?
My particular field, as far as mixing, I get paid as soon as the work is done, delivered, da-da-da. But as a producer, which I have worn that hat before, I've produced a couple songs on Snoop's, the Snoop Lion album when he was doing reggae. And, there's a couple other projects I've done throughout my career where I have worn the producer hat, or I have produced on those records where I was a writer. I got publishing, and so you do get quarterly publishing checks from BMI is who I'm on. Yeah, so you do get those, and I still get them to this day. And they might be. I remember I did a song for Monica on her second album. I still get checks from But of course it'd be like a check for 85 cents or, sometimes the checks don't even be worth the paper they're printed on. And you just be like, I would. Sometimes if you don't cash the check, like I'm not about to go to the bank and deposit a check for 27 cents. I'm just not.
Right.
I just don't have that kind of time. It costs me more than 27 cents to get to the bank. Like,
right.
It's just dumb. So I'll just let it ride, and then it rolls over into when they send you the next check. And then, 2 years from now, it might be $3. Then I might go deposit the $3. But that was, I'm referencing work that was done in like 1996, maybe.
Yeah, and those songs don't, and what you have to understand is in order for Leslie to get a bigger check, those songs need to get played more.
Yeah, so nobody's playing
that
a song that wasn't a single on Monica's second album. Y'all ain't playing that too much anymore. So.
So this is a great segue into what I wanted to bring up next. So we've been talking about work for hire. So hopefully, if you haven't had a business course yet, you understand that work for hire means you don't own anything. The client brings the work to you. You do it. Thank you. Have a nice day. And hopefully the check doesn't bounce or whatever, however you take your payments. But you did just mention that you have publishing on some songs. As a mix engineer, you do not receive a royalty. That's not part of the culture as the standard of being a mix engineer. It's a work for hire. You are not a producer in that sense where you can get a royalty. But a client can, if they choose to, almost like tipping a waiter at a restaurant. Leslie, I like your work so much, let me give you
Right, and they'll offer you what's referred to a point or half a point. And now there's the new law where we are going to get...
Yeah, so we can get into that. So there's the Music Modernization Act, if anybody's following what's going on with copyrights. And so now, look how happy he is, right? So now what they're doing is typically royalties through these different avenues is strictly an income revenue stream for just the content creators. Now with the Music Modernization Act, you're being given an opportunity for other people who contributed to the recording to obtaining a royalty through the mechanical license for streaming. So that includes engineers and producers, which is only the case for streaming. But we're in a streaming industry now.
Right.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah, so we're slowly getting a little piece of the pie.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's saying something, especially because all these years. But at the same time, is there a part of you that's kind of happy that you don't rely on royalties and the success of the record necessarily just to get the income? Because you still got to work on the record. You're going to get paid no matter what.
Right.
So is there an aspect or is there a time when you're like, you know what, I'm glad I'm not waiting on the royalty?
Yeah, it's balance. Of course, when you have projects like, Happy that sold and went
crazy,
a gajillion copies, you do wish you had a bigger piece of X, Y, and Z. But at the same rate, it all balances out. Yeah. And I mix a ton of projects daily that I get paid pretty well to mix. And it's cool to be able to do what you do, get your money, and keep it moving. So,
do you follow up on receiving credit on the projects that you work on? So do you make sure your name is spelled right? Do you make sure that, do you go back and check and make sure that the credit was there? I mean, again, you've been doing it for 27 years.
I was going to say, in the beginning, I was kind of concerned about that. And I think that was an era, too, where there was more physical copies and you want to see your name on the back of that CD and da-da-da. But I think I kind of got out of caring about it pretty quick because I'm one of those people like I know what I did. And if you make a name for yourself in this industry, people know what you did and people talk and it's, so I got less concerned with it. It's still nice to see that, or it's still nice when other people see it and recognize it. I had people, texting me the other day like, man, I saw your name on the Jay-Z Beyonce thing. And I was like, how y'all even see credits? And I forgot the title post credits. And you can Wikipedia things sometimes and they'll have your credit. Just depends. So somebody sent me a screenshot of a Wikipedia thing with my name, and then somebody else sent me a screenshot of the title credit. I think it was for Cardi B one time. Somebody sent me a screenshot of the her first single. Be Careful. They sent me like the screenshot of the credits, and I was like, dang, I didn't even know they even print credits anymore. And they were like, no, on Tidal they do credits. So that was pretty cool.
So for the students that are just coming out, though, we are in a very digital age, though, and you tell somebody you did something, they're going to go look you up. So receiving or making sure you get the credit. And by the way, you guys can also pick and choose what projects you want your name to show up on. But I think that's important for them,
Sure.
you know, in that building process. Like, again, you're now very established. You've been through a lot of that, but we are so focused on the internet now. And, you know, even my conversations with them, it's about watch what you're doing on social media.
Sure.
And because it could affect whether or not a client wants to work with you. You know what I mean? So I think making sure you receive credit is really important. The other thing I wanted to bring up before I forget is you have been in a situation where you've worked on albums for 2 artists who were kind of beefing. I really want to impress 2 things, and please speak on it as long as you need to. 1, you can't be a fan when you're working.
Sure.
And 2, stay out of the drama.
Yeah, I was working with 2 rappers in Atlanta who were beefing, and I would be mixing with one of them, and then the one rapper would be like, so what's so-and-so saying about me? Da-da-da. I'd be like, man, you know I can't tell you that. Because the thing is, the minute I tell this rapper what the other rapper said about him, he now understands that I'm going to do the same thing when I go over there. And so now I'm not trustworthy anyway. So when you're trying to gain favor with somebody, I don't care who it is. Like, I don't care who it is. I don't care what level they're at. I'm not doing that. I'm not telling you what so-and-so is doing, or I'm not playing. I've had artists ask me like, oh, I heard you just mix so-and-so. Play me a little something. Nope. I don't do that. I don't play other artists' records for other artists. I don't talk about conversation. And it's funny, if you're a professional, you operate in an NDA state of mind anyway. I always operate in a non-disclosure state of mind when it comes to all the things I had to sign for the Beyonce and Jay-Z project. That's usually the state of mind we'd be in anyway. That's why we don't have a problem signing those kind of documents. Like, I'm cool. I'm not going to talk about your private life. I don't do that anyway. Like, with other artists, or if I know so-and-so beefing and so-and-so made a, you know, if Meek Mill and Drake beefing and Meek Mill say something about Drake, I can't run back and tell Drake what Meek Mill said, even though I am a fan of Drake, and I am not a fan of Meek Mill, just in a fan standpoint. But I can't violate those. That's a code of conduct. Like, I just don't even get involved in that.
And it's a quick way to lose business.
Sure.
A very quick way to lose business. What do you think is the reason, besides, yes, you do great quality work. That's obvious. What do you think is the Leslie Brathwaite thing that keeps bringing people back to you? Do you think it's one thing? Do you think it's a bunch of things?
I think it's a combination. I think, obviously, doing good work, doing work that people like. And I think one of my qualities or attributes is the fact that I can work quickly. I knock things out pretty quickly. And then it's just vibes. Sometimes it's just getting along with people, understanding all these. I've seen people not get work because they violated an NDA, or, you know, so just understanding how to navigate professionally and respect people and respect people's protocol. And, you know, if so-and-so called me and asked me for X, Y, and Z, I got to make sure I respect the protocol. I got to say, hey, is it okay to send this to so-and-so or X, Y, and Z? You got to know how to navigate situations to where people just respect you all around. So I feel like it's a combination of things. But being somebody that people want to work with or want to be around, I think, is one of the top things up there. Because you could be I've seen people who are super skilled that can't get work because people don't like working with them. So people got to want to work with you.
I think a lot of people underestimate the need to make sure that you are somebody people want to be around.
Sure.
Because y'all going to be in that studio for a long time.
Yeah, and you got to know when to talk, when not to talk. You got to realize when somebody's having a bad day, or when somebody's talking about something that don't concern you, or you have to understand social cues. Like, if I'm in a room with artists and they're having a conversation that clearly is either a delicate conversation or something negative about somebody else, I get up and leave the room. You know how to navigate, and they don't want to have to turn to you and say, hey, can you give us a moment, please?
Right.
You got to know when those moments are. If somebody got to ask me to leave a room so they can have a conversation, that means I'm not paying attention. You should know when it's time to leave the room. The only time that ever happens is when they initially walk in the room and they want to have the room. They'll ask you, hey, can we have the room? But if they start talking about something that you don't feel like you should be a part of, get up and leave. Or don't comment. Or I've seen people like blow their careers like an assistant or intern, make a comment on something that ain't got nothing to do with them. Nobody didn't even ask for your opinion. So it's all about that kind of stuff too. That I think one of the most underestimated things, especially with this generation, is knowing when to talk and when to not. And something that drives me up a wall, put your phone on silent. Nothing irks me more than when I'm in a public environment or an environment, especially in the studio or with students, and like, or I have an intern in the back of the room, and then they're on like Instagram with the volume up and like they're looking at different like videos, and I'm like, we don't want to hear that. Turn that off. That drives me insane, probably more than anything else.
Yeah, they know about the phone rule.
Oh my God, it drives me nuts. Drives me insane.
Anybody have any questions for Leslie? Do you guys have any questions? I don't want to hog the floor. Oh, there's a question over here. So a mic is on its way. Keep your hand up so he can find you.
Yeah.
There you go. It's
These
coming.
lights is bright.
I know, right? Ooh.
Bright lights.
Awesome.
Okay, so you had said that when you're talking with like a individual client about pay, you might open up the floor by saying something like, "What's your budget?" How does that differentiate between working with like a larger company like it was NBC for Despicable Me or something like that? How does that conversation go versus the one with the individual?
And again, it's about doing research. So I don't open that up to every client. Only if you pull up in a Rolls Royce and you got off a private jet will I say, what's your budget? Or if I feel like you may have the means. If I feel like that is not the case, for whether it's intuition or some external indicator, let me know that you may not have the kind of budget, or it's somebody's auntie's cousin's friend who just want me to mix a record for them. 9 times out of 10, they ain't got the budget. So you got to kind of know how to navigate those conversations. Again, with NBC Universal, on movie projects, movie budgets are insane. So I'm coming in with the big guns. They're going to have to tell me no, because they got the budgets, you know? So
do your research.
Yeah, do your research. Cool. You got to kind of tailor your answer based on the situation. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Here's another one back there, back row.
It's kind of like if Bill Gates come up to me and say, "Hey, I want you to mix a record for me." There is no budget. You getting that ticket. That's going to be a ticket for you, Bill Gates.
All right. So, good to see the smiles today. But quick question. When students graduate from Full Sail, they're given tools and jewels, when they're out of here. Some students were able to build up clientele, and do some work. Some students just focus strictly on school, but they have the skills developed from being at Full Sail. So what kind of advice would you be able to give, or tips on how fresh students, that's still wet behind the ears on that lifestyle when they leave, on how to build up clientele?
Learn. Get in environments that the number one thing that can make you fail in life after you leave any type of learning institution is when you think the learning stops when you leave here. So the minute you think, oh, I got an education, I got a degree, I'm good, I'm a professional now. No, you're not. Be in learning mode. Be always willing to learn something. Be observant. Like I said, be quiet. Just observe and learn and soak in all you can about the specific environment that you're in, whether it's a studio, whether you're on the road, whatever environment you're in, soak up as much knowledge about that environment and learn, and always be in learning mode. I'm in learning mode. When I went to London with the other engineers, I was talking about Young Guru and Tony Maserati and Stewart. We were all in learning mode. We were all like, I was sharing plugin settings, and we were talking about things, and I'm learning about different how Stewart may do certain things, or you always in learning mode. You never feel like you know everything, and so I think that's one of the biggest tools for a new student, a new graduate, I should say, is just be in learning mode. Don't think that just because you got a degree that you're a professional. That's not the case.
There's a question over
right
here.
in front.
Are there any online questions? Just to check really quick. No? Oh, there's one? Okay.
Good afternoon.
JJ Boogie asked, with the advent of many major studios closing down and more people recording in smaller or home studios, do you find the quality of recordings lower now? If so, how do you deal with that?
Yes, sometimes the quality of recordings is lower because of that, but it's great for me because it makes my paycheck go up because now everybody need me. And I remember somebody came to me once and said they thought that the internet and technology was going to kill our jobs. And I was like, no, it's going to, I knew this before it happened. I was like, it's going to do the opposite. Because when you take a tool that a professional uses and puts it in the hands of amateurs, all it does is highlight the fact that you don't know how to do what I do. So it makes me look better. So when everybody has access to recording and Pro Tools and everything, all it does is highlight your need for somebody to mix it. Because you can't mix it yourself, and you're not, you know what I'm saying? So it's great for me. I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened is, people getting studios in their home and having access to studios on a laptop and because it enhances the need for somebody to make it sound good. So I think it's actually a great thing. We had a question over here.
Oh,
we had
you're
one
over
here.
there. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Good afternoon. Ryan Brown, Entertainment Business. First, thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. I had a couple of questions, but the most important one was about the NDAs. So as a student who's working on a project that, I think is pretty big, but I do need assistance from someone or people who are out there in the industry right now, how can I approach those individuals with an NDA mindset but not offend them since I need their help?
Now, when you say with an NDA mindset but not offend them, what? Give me, I don't understand.
All right,
what you
so
mean.
basically, let's say it's an app or idea. I don't want them to take my idea and run with it or do it better than me because they're already in that space. They have the tools, the resources.
Gotcha.
Yeah. How do
The best way to protect yourself is to copyright your material. To my knowledge, it's not that expensive, and Monique can probably elaborate on the answer as far as how to copyright. But just protect yourself and make sure that you safeguard against that. Are you from Barbados?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was going to ask you what your accent later.
Yeah,
That's cool.
My dad is from Barbados.
Cool.
But you're from St. Thomas, right?
Yep, I'm from St. Thomas, Virgin Islands.
And second question real quick. You're in a space where you have a lot of influence, a lot of reach. What do you think is the next big wave or the next sound for the next few years? Or
I don't know. I'm still riding the current wave. I don't know. I don't. Fortunately, it's not my job to predict, so I tend to stay out of that mindset. My job is just to deal with the material that I'm working with. Cool. So I like being in that space. So okay. I don't know.
But I do want to say, I'm going to add to his question while we find the next. So if you have a question, put your hand up so they can find you. Just to kind of add on to what he was saying, you do have other projects in the works. You're doing something with Waves. I know you can't go through all the details, but...
Yeah, I do have a new partnership with Waves plugins. I can't talk about it yet. But I am officially a Waves artist, and then there's some things coming. So that's all I can say.
That's all we get.
Because I signed the NDA. I don't want to get in trouble.
All right, where'd the mic go? Oh, she has it. Or is there one over here too?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there.
But let's get her. Go ahead.
Hello. When you're selecting a project that you want to work on, do you care more about the experience that you'll gain from the project or the impact that you will have from the project?
Well, in most cases, I don't select. I let the project select me. So when people call me and say, hey, we want you to mix this record, the answer is usually always yes. And I figure out a way to get it done. So it's not really about me selecting what I want to work on. But there are times when I do have to turn, I have to turn projects down. That's usually just indicative of my schedule. Like if I just physically can't do it, I just can't do it. But I don't really have any precursors to oh, well, this is going to be a better experience or this is going to be, it's all about chronological order. And I always try to maintain the integrity. I've had cases where I agreed to do a project for a lower level artist and then a high level artist a call, and I can't just diss the lower level artist. I may approach them and say, hey, and in certain situations with certain people, you got to be like, hey man, so-and-so calling. You mind if I go do this, da-da-da, but you still give them that respect. And so it's always, for me, it's always about just scheduling. It's never really a product of whether I want to do something or don't want to do something. I try to do everything.
Do you have somebody you trust that you feel is on your level at least that you can kind of sub the workout to?
Sure.
So you
sure.
So, okay.
Yeah, colleagues, friends, guys that came up under me. One of the people I sub a lot of stuff out to the most is Corey Anders. He's a Full Sail grad. He used to be my assistant for years, and there's times when I can't get to something, and I'll be like, man, give Corey a shot at it. Or if they don't want to pay my prices, I know his prices are a little lower because he's a little behind. Not what's the word I'm using? He's just I'm a little further in my walk than him career-wise,
Yeah.
and so I know he's not charging what I'm charging.
But he's still good.
Yeah, he's good. So I can say, I've had clients that be like, bro, you're killing me. Your budget, I can't do that. And I'm like, cool. I got somebody who can do it for that, for what you're trying to pay, because I just can't do it for that. Or, so.
Yes, ma'am. Right here.
Hi, Leslie. How are you?
Hi.
Well, my question is about, you were saying that with all the engineers that you work, you are actually open to criticizing and everything, and like when they give you like actually words of advice. When do we know when to ask for like advice, or how do we know they're actually giving the right, like, how can I say it?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Because you know what I mean? Because sometimes they're gonna like say like, well, you should do this, you should do it in a way. But how you know if they're actually doing like, I want you to improve, or they're saying like,
So if they're trying to sabotage you or not.
Right. Those are things that are feedback. I like it. Those are things that are hard to always know how to. It's hard to know how to frame an answer for that question. But there's this little thing that God or whoever you believe in gave us inside called intuition and vibe. Trust that. You know what I mean? Usually, you'll know when the vibe is off. Or you kind of, when you have to question something, you already know the answer to the question. So when you have to kind of question, is this person really doing this in my best interest? If you got to really ask that question, 9 times out of 10, you already know the answer. Whereas, like I said, with guys that I respect and trust, and there's a certain working code of ethics with a Tony Maserati or Young Guru or Stuart White, I mean, I trust anything those guys tell me about my mixes, and I wouldn't have any reason to feel like, because their mindset and their energy was just right. And you know, like I said, that thing in there, that intuition, when vibes is off. You know what I mean?
There's a gentleman over here.
So earlier when you were talking about like work ethic, like you said like if someone asked you to like clean the bathroom, like you should do a good job doing it. But like how do you not like pigeonhole yourself so like you don't become like the bathroom cleaning guy? So like the employer takes you more seriously.
I've never bought into that theory. I've had people ask me that before, and I think that that's overthinking. I think that I've had people say that to me, like, well, I've had actually colleagues say that to me, well, I think somebody actually said that to me that day where they were like, oh, now you're the bathroom cleaning guy. And I'm like, no, I'm just the guy that does good work. You have to give people more credit for elevated thinking. And 9 times out of 10, the people who think like that or who say things like that, they have very small minds. And the people who matter, they know how to think. They know how to see the big picture. So I'm always trusting that if somebody sees that I clean bathrooms well, knowing good and well that's not what I'm trying to do, I give them credit for understanding how to elevate their thought process.
And there's a balance between what if we're talking about internships, what the purpose of the internship is for, and just things that need to be done around the office, maybe just to keep you busy so at least you're around if something comes around. But I think it's the Department of Labor. I have a link for my students, but that basically tells you because there are legal guidelines for companies that hire interns.
Yeah, there's certain things we can't ask interns to do anymore.
Yeah, like there's a very famous studio right now being sued for mistreating their interns.
Yeah.
So there are legal guidelines. So if you're in there, if a 6-month internship and all you've done is clean bathrooms, there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And like Leslie said, you got to trust your instincts. You got to know when, this, no. not happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are legal guidelines for internships, so you want to make sure you research that. And I think the Department of Labor has that information. Is there another microphone somewhere? Oh, she has it. There you go.
So, you spoke about how you always have to sign agreements. So when was it that you started branding yourself with a business name instead of just Leslie Brathwaite?
Very early in the process, right when I started getting, when I started getting work as an individual, when people were asking me to mix records, more so than record. Because recording, when you're a recording engineer, you don't get asked to sign a lot of contracts, or you're definitely work for hire because they're just paying you by the hour. But with mixing, you're more part of the final product, and so the approach is a lot different. So when I started mixing very early in my career is when I did that.
So what made you choose the name that you have? Was it just like an aha moment, or did you...
Oh, the Dub 750?
Yeah, like what does 750 mean? Is there a meaning behind it?
There's a story behind it. So when I was a kid, my mom used to work at the University of the Virgin Islands, and I had a little business. I was an entrepreneur even back then. This is when I was in like the 5th, 6th grade. She bought me, for Christmas, this... I think it was a Pioneer dual cassette deck. You know what a cassette is? a dual cassette deck radio, which at the time was the biggest deal ever. You can actually make a copy of tape to tape.
The original
so back
mixtape.
then, they called them dubs. You make a dub of a tape. And so I had a little business, and I used to have this sign up on her door. Mind you, my mom is like the director of admissions, and she got her son in half of her office with like a business. And so I would charge the college students $7.50 to make them a dub of their cassette. So I had a sign on her door that says one dub $7.50. And so she kept it, and she had it and the one got cut off or something. So there's a sign in I think she still has it somewhere in her house, and it says Dub 750. So I named that That's awesome. That was my music company.
That's awesome.
That's my first little business.
She knew you were going to be something successful.
Yeah.
Was there another? Oh, here we go.
I'm Fernando from Recording Arts. Some of us are about to graduate, and I was just wondering kind of what you look for as an employer, what you look for in your interns, and not necessarily as part of the hiring process, but once they're in the door, once they're working for you, what do you expect them to be doing? What are the boundaries? Because everyone gets there and they're so excited. You never know.
I typically, there's two things I love about interns. People that I don't have to ask things of, when you just instinctively know how to move and navigate an environment, like what I was talking about earlier, where the interns that know, I don't have to turn and say, hey, can you give me a minute? They know when it's time to get out of the room, or they know when to be quiet, or those are the interns I gravitate to. And then a lot of times too, the ones that have the things that you can't teach. There's certain things you just can't teach people. You either got it or you don't. Where I don't want to have to tell you that it's important that you show up on time. You should know that. If I tell you I'm gonna be somewhere at 9:00, you should be there at 8. Just those kind of things. There's things that you don't, and not that you can't teach certain things. I don't want to. So you can teach somebody how to be punctual. I don't want to have to teach you that. Because if I got to teach you that means I got to teach you a whole lot of other stuff. I want you to have had a certain part of life figured out. I can teach you if you come in not knowing anything about Pro Tools, I'm cool with that because I can teach you anything technical. But I don't want to have to teach you life things. I don't want to have to say, if I said I'm coming in at 9, that you're there at 8. Or I don't want to have to tell. I've had interns actually come ask me, can they go home? I don't want to have to ask. I don't want to have to tell you, you don't leave unless I leave. You shouldn't have a reason to want to go home before I go home. You know what I mean? So those kind of things. The things that I don't want to have to tell you things that I think you should know instinctively. So that's kind of what I look for. And you see it right away. And I've had this famous thing where I've said in many lectures about, the McDonald's run. When I send somebody to McDonald's, I don't want to have to tell you, if I send you to McDonald's to get me some nuggets and I don't tell you what kind of sauce to bring me.
Bring them all.
Figure it out. The best option is to bring them all. Can't lose that way. I don't want to have to tell you if I send you to the Jamaican food spot to bring me back a knife and a fork and a napkin. You know, like I've had people actually bring me food and hand me a plate of food and no utensils. And I'm like, this is not a complete gesture. This is incomplete. You know what I mean? You know, my 9-year-old knows that. If she sits a plate of food down in front of me, she's going to go give me a fork or vice versa. It's an incomplete gesture to give somebody a plate of food and not give them something to eat it with. Those are the kind of things. You know what I mean?
When you have an intern, how involved do you let them get if you're working on a project?
A lot of times when they're new interns, not at all. I'm still testing them out to see all these basic things. And like you said, it's not a 6-month process. Like I can figure out what you got going on in like a couple days.
Yeah.
And then it just depends on things. Certain projects, they're not allowed to sit in the room. You know, there's certain clients that that will tell you, hey, I just want you to be in the room by yourself. I don't want interns. Like Jeezy's huge on that. Whenever I'm mixing Jeezy records, he'd be like, hey man, make sure it's just you in the room. Don't let the interns in there.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want nobody to hear their stuff. Or, you know, Drake has said that before.
Or put it on Instagram.
Sure.
Do you have a thing where you make them, because I know it's a big thing now with studios where they make a lot of their interns and other employees lock up phones, no phones.
Yeah, I don't want phones around me, period. Like anybody who's ever interned for me, they know I hate that. Like I can't stand, like the thing I said where they'll just be sitting there and like all of a sudden they're scrolling through Instagram and they have these videos of, and I just like turn your phone off. Like I don't even want.
It shouldn't even be out.
Nope. Yeah.
Were there any more online questions?
We had one from Ricardo. Wanted to know, what are your top 3 metrics that you use when keeping an eye on the business that you own?
Top 3 metrics. Am I happy? Is work flowing? And is this meaningful work? And so those are the things that always keep me in line. Like I said, I like the happiness I like the freedom of what I do. And so I always want to be happy. It doesn't matter how much money I'm making I just want to be happy. And as I've gotten older, the meaningful work answer has probably shot up the list. I want to do meaningful work. And that's why I like coming here a lot. That's why I split a lot of my time. I'm always either one of 3 places. I'm always either in the studio, on vacation with my family, or here at Full Sail. And so I like coming here a lot because it's meaningful work to me. It's what I'm doing today, conversations I've had with a class this morning with Darren, or a lab that I visited the other night, or had some students in the studio with me. That's meaningful work to me. So,
anybody else? All right, so we're going to close with one last question from me. Over here, Leslie.
Oh. I was like, who got the last question? I was trying to see who the lucky person was. Like,
oh my goodness. I was like, oh man. So the last thing I want to ask you is, I know the classes now, and you've been around long enough now to know you're on our advisory board along with several other Hall of Famers, which is awesome. So between the classes you took when you were at Full Sail and what you see us offering now, what is the class that you feel that you probably, or classes, without insulting anybody's class, but really the class that you feel you use the most, or you're getting the most use out of in your career?
Honestly, if we're talking in the context of what this whole conversation was around, my music business class would have been high on the list.
You had Al Schlesinger back then, right? Or no?
Yeah, but that wasn't even a class. That was just
True.
He just came and lectured for a week, and But certainly, clearly, by all the missteps like with taxes and all the other stuff, like music business would have been on the top of my list. Obviously, the what's Darren's class? Mixing techniques, advanced. Yeah, that would have been one that I would have really been like super excited about. And we had our versions of that back then, but I mean, like I say it all the time. I can't stress it enough. You guys have some of the most awesome curriculum ever when it comes to audio creativity, and that applies to the whole school. But I'm just saying, just in an audio context, I mean, amazing content.
It's really evolved since you were here.
Oh yeah,
so.
oh yeah.
Well, I know we could talk for days, but we have to wrap it up. Thank you so much, as always. Let's round of applause for Leslie. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys for coming, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.